Hi everyone. Welcome.
Wow.
To the special
Yeah, they didn't need a
today.
mic.
My name is Stephen Bridges. For those of you who don't know, I'm the associate curator at the United Art Museum here at Michigan State University. I have the pleasure of both welcoming you today, but also a special guest for this amazing talk, Cary Loren and John Sinclair. I've been told the primary focus of the conversation today will be the Detroit Artist Workshop, though I fully suspect that we will cover a wide range of topics.
And beyond.
And beyond, okay. Of which John Sinclair was one of the founding members. On a personal note, I would just like to say that I've had the great pleasure of working with Cary Loren over the past 8 to 10 months on a number of projects at the museum. And I would like to extend a special acknowledgement and thanks to Cary.
Thank you.
Most recently, an exhibition called the Detroit Artist Workshop that is on view at the museum presently, which also includes many examples of John's editorial work, his political organizing efforts, and writings from the 60s and 70s. So that exhibition is on view through May 13th. If you haven't been to see it, I would strongly urge you to come by. So before I turn it over to John and Cary, by way of a brief introduction, I'm going to give you the quick bios. Author, poet, activist, and Michigan's most beloved weirdo, John Sinclair, was a cultural revolutionary, radical leader, and political prisoner all by the end of the 1960s. Founder and voice of the Detroit Artist Workshop and White Panther Party, Sinclair pushed the front ranks of the hippie revolution. John worked tirelessly through the 60s and 70s, 70s and 80s, providing a community voice to residents of Michigan and beyond, and still makes his voice heard today. He's considered one of the pioneers of podcasting with his weekly internet program, the John Sinclair Radio Show on Radio Free Amsterdam. Cary Loren is an artist, musician, writer, and archivist. He was a founding member of the Detroit Monsters Collective in 1973, along with Mike Kelly, Jim Shaw, and Niagara. His work has been shown worldwide, including the Biennial American Art in 2002, and published in What Nerve, Alternative Figures in American Art in 1960 to the present. He is co-owner of the
Bookbeat.
Bookbeat. Greatest bookstore in the world.
Detroit Artist Workshop Steering Committee. I think with that, I'd also like to extend our gratitude to the Department of History here at MSU, specifically Mike and Sam, for the support of this program. So with that, guys, please take the
Okay.
That's us.
So this morning, when I was, thank you, Stephen, and I'd like to thank the Broad Museum, Mark Olivier, and Brian there for having us here. Thank you. So this morning, John, I was trying to think of a slide to start the talk out with, because it's like the beginnings are kind of important. And I thought, well, what is something? I knew that I was thinking of Olson and Creeley, and I pulled out.
Wow.
I pulled out his
You're going
book.
to start in the modern era, huh?
Well, I pulled out his book, Musal.
I've attended his lectures before.
Well, his book,
Generally, the history of art starts with Adam and Eve.
John,
And there's drawing on the wall, and it goes on from there
so
for
this Musal.
several millennia. And then we get to Charles Olson and Robert Creeley. Anyway, I'm glad you get there so soon.
Olson was an experimenter, as you know, in psychedelics.
Yes.
And he wrote, this is like a quote about his mushroom experience. And he was one of the first people that took LSD with Allen Ginsberg and Tim Leary.
Right. Well, let's say, to preface that Timothy Leary was conducting the experiments with LSD mostly with prisoners, trying to find a way to help them out of their recidivistic ways and help society as well. And he got to thinking, as you do with the LSD, you get to thinking, what happened if some artists were taking this? Right. And he met Allen Ginsberg, who was the most perfect representative of an artist in America at that time, in my opinion. He got the perfect guy. And he turned Ginsberg on to, I guess they were psilocybin they were taking.
Yeah.
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms.
And he gave Ginsberg a supply of whatever pills or whatever they were, capsules, and suggested that he pass them out among artists and poets and musicians and painters that he knew. So he gave some to Charles Olson, Robert Lowell took some. Ginsberg was charged with turning on people in New York. He got Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, and others. He just said, well, why don't you try this and let me know what happened.
You wrote a great poem about
thank
this, too, about the meeting of Ginsberg.
Should I do the poem? Can I do it?
Yeah, do the
that
poem.
okay?
Yeah, do it.
I know this is a talk, but really I'm a poet, you know, so.
Let's do it right now. It's
They say one day, in the early 60s, after Timothy Leary turned him on to LSD, Allen Ginsberg went up to Monk's place in the West 60s to introduce the great master to the wonders of modern chemistry, and left Monk with a dose of the excellent product of the Sandoz laboratories, all the way from Switzerland. And when he went back to check up on Thelonious, see, there's supposed to be an interlude of psychedelic music in there, okay?
right. We
You
recorded
can
this,
do that,
actually.
yeah, I know. And when he went back to check up on Thelonious, Monk opened the door as far as the chain would allow, peered out at Ginsberg, and asked with a slight frown, "Man, have you got any more of this stuff? So far, it don't seem to be making too much of a difference to me." I call that Monk in orbit.
Well, in the book,
That's a true story, though. Ginsberg told me it was true.
in the book, Olson is quoted as saying the Aztecs called the mushroom God's meat. You bit God when you took the mushroom. And that's where carne, the word carne for meat in Spanish, comes from the Nahuatl expression for the mushroom.
Wow.
So when you buy meat in the store, it's carne, it's God's meat.
Wow.
Literally the quarter of God. And
What
that's
about the vegetarians?
that's
are
so
they gonna
literal you can't beat it. That's
Can't
Olson's.
beat their meat. There you go.
So another image that I thought about John,
Me, you're talking about?
yeah, besides this kind of idea of the history of psychedelics, which goes back thousands of years. I mean, you
Yeah,
think
now
about
I knew we would get there.
people had to try different plants and see what it would do,
First, there was a mushroom.
So people would eat something, they would die, and they'd go, well, we're not going to eat that anymore. And then they try something else, and they would get high.
This is good for that itch when we brush
And
up
that's
against
it.
that
Yeah,
bush.
they get high, and then they go, yeah, we'll keep this going. So there were these mushroom cults that grew up kind of in South America and were there for thousands of years. They found these stone edifices. And this other image of the ghost dance, this Native American kind of dance was important.
The ghost dance was dedicated to bringing back the culture that had been eradicated by the white people.
It was like an
It was in
anti-colonialism.
the late 1800s.
1860s, 1880s, right.
80s more.
And so
Well, after they had wiped out all the Indian nations that used to own this country.
I kind of thought of the artist's workshop as kind of a tribal situation as well.
We were students of tribal society, for
Right.
sure.
John has a nickname of Big Chief, and I think that you got this from New Orleans, from the Indian.
Well, I'm a follower of the wild Indians of New Orleans, have been since 1976. So this is my passion in life, and so my friends who know me.
Maybe you should explain what
Oh,
The
it's
Indians,
too
it's
hard.
too long, okay. Well, it is,
Google, Wild Indians, New Orleans. Wild Magnolias.
so this is, Stephen, maybe you hit this just for about the
Whoa.
first 10 seconds. This is, John will explain, but I want you to hear this for just about 5 seconds.
Oh, come on.
You turn it up a little bit. Okay.
Say hey.
So John, when we used to talk about Ernie, this was a guy that you'd listen to when growing up in
That was my idol.
Davison. He was on what
WBBC, Flint, Michigan.
Flint.
AM 600.
And I could relate to that too. I mean, it's like when you're young and you have maybe a radio is like the only thing you have. Now, your radio was made by your father, wasn't it?
My father bought me a kit when I turned 7 years old and made me a radio, yeah.
Oh.
Sounds like an awful long time ago, but it was about 70 years ago.
But so the first
That
music
is a long time ago.
you were hearing was probably rock.
No, they didn't have rock.
What did they have then?
Patty Page.
Oh, okay, swing, sort of. No.
Swing was over. They had killed swing, and they replaced it with this post-war type of suburban music that was
Pop.
meant to lead America on to the greatness that it is today, where we're going to make it great again, you see. When they talk about making it great again, they're talking about moving it back before rock and roll, before the civil rights movement, before labor unions, before women were allowed to vote, to when you could lynch black people at will. This is the great America they're looking for today. So hopefully they won't find it,
But Detroit had a kind of a history of blues. This is
yeah.
John Lee Hooker, and this is Joe Battle, who first recorded him in
Marcia's
Detroit.
father. Joe Von Battle recorded many of the blues players of Detroit in the back of Joe's record shop on Hastings Street. He also recorded Reverend C.L. Franklin's sermons at the church on the corner every week. He turned out to be the father of Aretha, Carolyn, and Irma Franklin. And he also became, through Joe Von Battle's recordings, Joe had one of the first tape recorders in Detroit, back in the days when a tape recorder was quite a substantial outfit, about that deep, about that big. Not very many people had one. It was quite a substantial investment when he had one. And in fact, and he would take it down to the church on Sunday, and he would record Reverend C.L. Franklin giving his great sermons like the eagle stirreth its nest. C.L. Franklin was a hell of a preacher, if I can pardon the expression.
A lot of these slides.
Anyway, he licensed these recordings to these guys called Chess in Chicago, Leonard and Phil Chess. They put them out on their label as 78 RPM singles, and they would sell 1 million copies of Reverend C.L. Franklin preaching on Hastings Street in Detroit. And when Chess took over their own label from their partners and opened their own studio, they bought Joe Von Battle's record tape machine. So for those who are blues mental patients like myself, the idea of this humble machine on Hastings Street in Detroit, traveling to Chicago and then becoming the agency through which we hear music by Howling Wolf, Muddy Waters, Elmore James, Little Walter, all the great records of the 50s were recorded on this little machine of Joe's. I don't know, impresses the hell out of me.
And Frantic Ernie would probably play that, right?
Oh, yeah.
You were talking about that
He would play him in Flint. He was in
when
Flint
you
then.
when you were about
He
6.
moved to Detroit in the late 50s. Ernie Durham, you'd be proud to know, is the guy who broke Motown records on the radio. He played Smokey Robinson and the Miracles until they had a hit. And he created an awareness of Motown records that wasn't there before.
We were talking in the car about your experience as a DJ. Wasn't there, when you were 16, wasn't it around 16 maybe? Frantic John?
Yeah, I was at high school. I played the sock hop after the basketball game on Friday night. I modeled myself after Frantic Ernie
I love the idea of Frantic John.
Frantic John,
this-
Flint's youngest DJ.
This is a photo. I'm not sure what this is. I know
Oh
it's
my God.
a play.
So I was in college. I was an actor.
Okay.
I played in children's theater, and
This is
I
John
was
and
the
the
giant
Beanstalk.
in Jack and the Beanstalk. Yeah.
I had a feeling it was that, but
That was really fun. Well, them kids, if you play a play for kids, they go nuts, you know. It's very real to them. Look out, here comes a giant, you know. I love that. That was great.
this is one of your friends from
Lyman Woodard.
Davidson or from Flint,
He
right?
was from Owasso.
Yeah.
His mother, Jane Woodard, was active here at MSU in the arts and poetry. She had endowed a place called the Jane Woodard Poetry Room. That was Lyman's mother. He was my best friend. Hammond B3 player.
Some people
Oregon.
might know, well, I may have it later on about his Saturday night special. This is you at the Drome? I see.
Drome Lounge on Burlingame. No, Dexter.
Dexter in Detroit.
Dexter and Leslie, yeah. Bowling alley with a lounge that had named jazz artists.
So
Saw John Coltrane there.
these are, while I was researching John,
Yeah.
sometime in the 90s, when we went to Rotterdam together, and we did this
To where?
Rotterdam.
Oh, Rotterdam.
What,
yeah.
This is kind of
I
how
thought
I
you
met.
said Lauderdale.
No. This is kind of how
I
I
ain't
met.
going.
I met you. Well, I first knew your wife, Leni.
My
showed,
ex-wife.
I showed Leni's photographs at a small gallery in the bookstore.
I got another wife, so
Your first, yeah.
thanks.
Well, we had this kind of seminar about Detroit culture in Rotterdam,
That was so cool.
and the Boyman Museum showed some of the DAM stuff, and we had a seminar with you and Mike Kelly talking, and they had some philosophers on the stage as well.
Philosophers.
It was very
Dutch philosophers. God, I'll never forget that. They made us go to a meeting with food beforehand. They made us go. And then at the end, they made us pay for our own lunch. And I said, man, that's supposed to be what you mean by Dutch treat. No wonder you're a Dutch philosopher.
So when I got back to Detroit, I heard about the Bentley Library and about your archive that you had been sending a lot of your material, your own archive into. John started this John Sinclair, Leni Sinclair Library, essentially inside
Collection, they call it.
collection inside the Bentley, and it's probably the most used archive in the history of the Bentley, I believe.
Wow.
They've talked about that.
More than Governor Williams.
But so while I was going through it, I found an old journal from Flint.
I guess that's because they moved President Ford into his own library nearby.
Maybe. No, I don't think that.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to compete with him. He is from Grand Rapids.
So I found this journal that said "Love People" on it from University of Michigan in Flint, and that had this experience of peyote that John had in 1963, and you must have been aware of maybe reading Huxley at that moment, or because
I read whatever there was.
It was essentially, to me, it was like an outline of Doors of Perception. I mean, you took it and then you wrote poetry and you wrote about the experience and exactly what happened. And I decided that this would be an interesting thing. I started to take on publishing projects of yours, your first poetry books, and then I found this piece. And
That reminds me, I was thinking last night. I wanted to ask you if we couldn't do fire music.
yeah, that's
That's
probably
the
the
only
last
one
one,
that-
we
yeah.
haven't done, yeah.
Okay, good.
So for sure.
Good.
Sure.
You heard him.
We have one to go.
You heard him, he says we can do this. You're my witnesses. It's tough in publishing these days, you know, they don't want any books.
So
They
here-
want a movie called Black Panther that doesn't say nothing about Huey P. Newton or Bobby Seale.
I'm showing Ezra Pound because he has a connection. He has a connection here to Charles Olson. And
My mentor.
That was, while Pound was in prison, Olson would visit him, and
Well, it was a nut house,
This
you
was
know.
the
Wasn't really a prison.
right.
He had his own room,
Saint
you know, his
Elizabeth's.
wife lived with him there, you know.
Well,
They don't do that in prison.
I think Pound was pretty mentally stable, but
Yeah, but I mean, it was a nut house because he
he
would
had
have had to been crazy
For
to
him-
broadcast against the United States soldiers in Italy.
well, I don't think he had a
They
lot of
were on a
options.
mission from God.
Yeah. But Olson came up with this idea of writing the history of Melville's. It's sort of
Well, his idea was you write the history of whatever you wanted
right.
in your verse, and you could incorporate elements of that history into
Right.
your verse.
This is the book, the Call Me Ishmael,
Okay.
and it's kind of this idea of investigative verse that would later.
Well, Ed Sanders developed that concept in so many words, but Ed Sanders and I were both fervent followers of Charles Olson.
But Olson was like this historian at the same time as he was a great poet. So
Great.
He kind of was able to evolve it into this, these histories that were more than just histories. And projective verse was a kind of famous essay of his. Methodology of poetry, and Robert Creeley became a kind of exponent of this.
Well, they developed the concept together. They became friends through correspondence.
And it's a
Much
huge
like we do
correspondence.
today with email. They did it with letters.
This was, I think.
They didn't know each other. They were in a relatively close geographical proximity in New Orleans, New England.
Yeah.
Olson was in Gloucester, and Cary was in the woods somewhere in New Hampshire breeding pigeons for a living.
So
And
they kind of,
struck up I don't know, one of them saw the poem of another one and wrote a letter and said that was great, and then they went out from there.
and Creeley became, or Olson became the vector at Black Mountain College, right? He became the dean.
Correct.
And that had to be.
They brought him in, and it turned out to be the final stages of Black Mountain College, which
There's
was
a
an
picture of Black
experimental. Oh, there's a big hole right there.
Yeah.
He was about 6'7".
This is a picture of Robert Hayden,
Oh, wow.
and I'm showing him because
That's where Louis Farrakhan got that bow tie.
maybe so. I doubt it. But I'm showing this
He was big.
this
in his
image
day.
of the fighting peacocks.
Because he was from the University of Michigan, you know.
Yeah. He was also
Dare we say it?
he was also like the first poet laureate.
That I don't know. That's an
I'm going to
office
say
I don't
of the U.S.
understand.
I think maybe in the 70s. Someone maybe could check.
Not the U.S. though.
Yeah.
He's black.
Yeah, that's right.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Well, I think that it does sometimes.
They do now, but not then.
Well, this image of the...
They were a lower order of being than
Why I'm
who
showing
were-
you the peacock room
who were
is-
denied civil rights and the rights to education and jobs and whatever. I don't know, maybe you never heard of segregation. We had it here in the United States until 1965.
Let's move along.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's not get
This is
depressed.
Greeley and a couple of other compatriots of yours,
The Baraka and
Baraka.
Brian DePrima.
and, you know.
Looks like from here.
When did you meet Leroy Jones? Was it through the mail first, or?
Yeah, the mails were powerful in those days. Like I say, it was our email. You saw somewhere you'd find some little poetry magazine in some obscure bookstore. In Michigan, they had one bookstore in Ann Arbor called Bob Marshall Books. That was the only place you could get a poetry book in Michigan. We used to write away to get copies of Pictures of the Gone World by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Howl by Allen Ginsberg, Gasoline by Gregory Corso, $1 each. They would mail them to you, and that's how you would get them. And then if you liked it, you would figure out an address and you'd write to the guy who wrote it or the woman and you'd say, man, I really like that. You got any more?
Baraka probably wasn't the easiest person to get to see, though.
Well, I saw Baraka because I read that he was teaching at the State University of New York at Buffalo for the summer of 1964. And I was going to New York City for something. And being an extremely penurious artist, when you went to New York City from Detroit, you would have to go through Canada, and then you'd have to go from Buffalo to New York City on a 2-lane highway, because otherwise it cost $5 to drive the turnpike, and you didn't have 5. So you'd take the 2-lane down there. So I decided to stop in Buffalo and find Leroy Jones.
Wow.
So I found a register of classes and where he was, what room it was. And I just went there and sat in the back while he did the course, and then I went up and introduced myself afterwards. Of course, I'd written to him before, so I can't say he knew who I was per se, but he knew he'd gotten a letter from me. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
So you met some of the jazz musicians, right? Through
The last time I saw him, it was the same. I turned up in Gloucester. I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire with my pal Bruce Pingree playing at his bar. It was Friday night, and I looked at him and said, Saturday, Mary Baraka is going to be in Gloucester giving the annual Charles Olson Lecture at the public library. I said, wow, Bruce, you want to go to Gloucester tomorrow? So we drove down there. What are you doing here? I said, well, I heard you were here, so I thought I'd better come, you know. And he died not very long after that, so I was really glad we did that.
He came out for, I got the Mocad Museum to bring him out for the Destroy All Monster thing.
Right, that was
And he did
terrific.
that, yeah. This is the Red Door Gallery in Detroit, 1963. And this is kind of the, in some ways, the precursor of what the
In every way.
It was a community space, basically. And they brought a lot of avant-garde artists.
It was a storefront.
It was a storefront.
This painter named Larry Weiner, his father had the garage, Sam's. I forget what he called it.
No, car wash.
No, it was a garage. Car wash was, he had a whole block.
Oh. It was
And
like
you could drive your car in there and they'd fix it and they'd paint it for you, know, whatever. It was a big deal.
Wow.
That was Larry Weiner's dad.
So I think he viewed...
Of course, they thought Larry was crazy because he wanted to be a painter. And in fact, they used to, in those days, if you were from a family that had money and you weren't doing the right thing, they would put you in a nut house. private nut house till you could agree to go on with the program and go ahead and go to Harvard, or wherever they wanted you to go. Well, I remember we used to break Larry Weiner out of the nut house on Friday nights.
So in this picture, there's George Tisch standing up. I don't know if this
Anyway, Larry Weiner got his dad to give him the storefront in this block log building to have an art space. So all these weirdos then based themselves there. All these people were attending Monteith College at Wayne State University, an experimental college that was so hip that, of course, they've done away with it.
Well, this is George Tisch here, who's holding up a painting by the artist Nishira, Izo Nishira.
Izo.
And this is Robin Eichly here in the glasses. This is his girlfriend, Martine Elgeyer. And I'm not sure, this is, I'm not sure who. These guys, Stone.
Oh, in the back, that's Alan Stone.
Alan Stone.
One of the first free-form disc jockeys in Detroit. And
is he a songwriter too, I think?
he went to San Francisco and became one of the first disc jockeys on KMPX radio.
This is George, Leni, and Charles Moore in front of the Red Door Gallery. There was a group in Ann Arbor that some people may know called the Once Group. It was kind of an avant group.
Kind of.
Well, very avant-garde. Robert Ashley and George Manupelli, and I'm not sure who else was. Gordon Muma. These people all performed here in Detroit. They play.
Well, they taught at Ann Arbor, or went to college there.
And this is the first flyer, one of the flyers for, maybe not the first, but one of the flyers for Izo's exhibition. George is standing next to his paintings. He's still alive in Arizona, I believe, somewhere.
George Tisch, also in Detroit.
This is an advertisement for the Once Group. And around this time, 1963, there was the prelude to the March on Washington, the Walk to Freedom that happened in Detroit. A lot of people from the workshop and the Red Door Gallery, James Seamark remembered being there.
We didn't have them.
This is Leni
Workshop,
Sinclair, who in '63 went to the march in Washington and took this photograph. And
Also in 1962, she was present in Port Huron for the formation of the Students for a Democratic Society.
she was like number 7 or something.
I don't know. I didn't know her then.
She also met this guy, this poet, Christopher Perret, on a boat going back to Russia, going back to East Germany, rather. And they had an affair on the boat, and pretty steamy affair that's told in letter form that is, hundreds of pages that I saw. He also did this cover for the Monteith Journal of the sort of communist kind of, worker. Leni returned. I guess they came back in '64, probably about the time.
I wasn't involved in any of that.
But right, no, I'm just saying. You around '64, you had this idea with Charles Moore to start this workshop society, the artist workshop,
Right.
as a kind of a group effort where you could play music and also explore poetry and art and support the
We
arts.
have a place where you could go.
Was this the first workshop building, or
Yeah,
what?
we rented a building at 1252 West Forest. And that's it. That's the front
And
porch.
that's George in the front.
$65 a month for the building.
So there were like 16 members, and you charged, I think it was
$5 was your entrance fee. And we got 16, and that was $80. So we paid $65 and got the lights turned on.
I want to mention this.
Then we had $3 a month dues.
We talked before about how you met people back in this time period. There wasn't an internet or a friends group or,
You met them by smoking weed together.
Yeah. Basically.
Let's put it in so many words.
Wait. Before, yeah, that's true, but.
It's true.
There was
Remember,
also this-
because you did this interview, and I forgot all about that part of it. Because I'm a weed, I smoke weed every day.
But.
Since
wait.
1962,
We also
so
talked about
I don't
trolling.
really have much of a
We
perspective
talked-
on this.
we talked about
But you had an interview with Charles Moore,
Yeah.
and he said, well, Sinclair, he had the weed bag, and so everybody had to come to our house. I forgot that part of it.
But also you had.
But
to-
it was true.
You had to first know if they were cool, so you had to like carry a book or a record with you on the street.
Well, anybody who wasn't normal stood out pretty strenuously against the background of square Americans who controlled everything.
I think that's how you met George Tisch, right? Too was.
I met George Tisch walking down the street. I was carrying a copy of Coltrane Live at Birdland and a copy of The Dead Lecturer by Leroy Jones.
Right. So this type of meeting, we were
Kind of
calling
like trolling for
Trolling.
intellectual, fellow intellectuals.
intellectual trolling, which is
Because
kind of-
this stuff was so far underground, you couldn't even imagine it today. So far underground.
it's-
Poetry, jazz, reefer, anything weird. The closest it got to mainstream was when Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road and published it in 1957 after 5 or 6 years of trying to get it published.
This is
And
Rob.
that was as close as you got to finding out that there was something else. And of course, our society as a whole was viciously segregated. And so a white person, there was no way you could know anything about any black people because they were in black America. And you kind of had a passport. You had to have a passport to go there. I got a passport. It was called a joint. And knowing who Miles Davis was. Then you could pretty much go to any black community in America and be accepted because that's the kind of people they were looking for. Not people who got high and listened to Miles Davis, just like me.
Rob,
But yeah, it was
You also
so
met-
incredible. There was no way, there's a lot of old people there, so I'm just preaching to the choir, but. Well, I mean, I'm saying that to say we remember, when if you wanted to know something about something, you couldn't just say bing, 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 oh yeah, that's it. You had to find out. And that was the fun part of life to me, was starting from, I lived in Davison, Michigan. You know, if you wanted to look in the dictionary and say, what is white America? What are squares? And they'd have a picture of Davison, the friendly travel hub city. That's where I grew up. So to find out anything beyond this was a strenuous process, but it also gave you a purpose in life. Otherwise, you would have had to go to work in the factory or go in the army, you know, those are right. Or even more dread, go to college, you know. Because I came from what they call, well, they don't have them anymore, but they used to be called working class communities where people had regular jobs, where they didn't make very much money, but they could pay their rent and maybe have their little mortgage or whatever.
so the structure at the workshop was like Sundays, you'd have music and poetry.
We rented a house.
Right. Maybe talk about what that was. This is
The physical part of it's important. He rented this house off of the Wayne State campus. It was otherwise would have been a student housing house probably. $65, second floor, first floor, basement. And we rented the second floor to Robin Eichley and Martine Allgaier. For I forget what
This is
part of
Robin in this
65.
photograph. Robin ran the press.
They lived upstairs. Well, we didn't have a press then. Later he ran the
Later, 64.
press was his idea.
65 rather. Well, the press
But
actually,
they moved in and rented the upstairs, which made it possible for us to keep this house for less than $65 a month.
wait, we got to back up a little bit because
Well, you got to back up because you got a bunch of beatnik, dope fiend, hippie dropouts from college who didn't have a job, and so you didn't have any money. And you had to hustle for you had to figure out how you were going to get your money. So the physical location, for people like us to have a physical location, was pretty extraordinary to begin with. And we had it because we were artists, and we wanted to be artists. We wanted to do things in arts. But the things we wanted to do were scorned and derided and hated by arts establishments and colleges and things like that. Poetry, we were at Wayne State University. This dreadful poet named W.D. Snodgrass had won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry. And he was at Wayne State on the faculty. He was like God. And I'm telling you, Mother Goose wrote better poems than this guy.
well, Monteith had this reputation.
So for any of us to get a reading at Wayne State was totally out of the question. Or anything, to be published
the Miles
in the Wayne.
Poetry Commemorative.
Well, see, Tish and Ikely, because they went to college there, they had some
they had the
connections.
connections.
So we got into some of that, but it was only because they knew him. It wasn't based on our merits.
I want to mention. I want to mention one professor at Monteith.
Our merits were despised.
John, I wanted to mention Otto Feinstein, the professor at Monteith, who deserves some
A
recognition.
giant.
Because what he did was really kind of empower the workshop people to giving them access to a mimeograph machine and paper.
Well, my Leni Sinclair worked for Otto Feinstein. That was her school job. She was a geography major. She had a job working for Otto Feinstein. So we had access, and then he let us use his mimeograph machine. We could get, if we could steal a box of paper somewhere, we could go to Otto's office in the middle of the night and run it off on his mimeograph machine and take it back to the artist's workshop and get a bunch of hippies together and give everybody a joint. And then you would collate these magazines and staple them,
This idea of the artist space really goes back some time. And
Oh, it was so much fun.
it was, let me see.
What I want to say about this whole period to preface and to surround it, and what makes it so interesting to me and so different from today is it wasn't about money at all. The artist workshop, nobody ever got paid for anything. Everybody did everything from their heart because we wanted to live in a world where this was the way it was. And so, and nobody wanted fame, glory, celebrityhood, or anything like that. We didn't care. If we wanted some recognition, we wanted to be from other people on our block who weren't artists, who could say, man, I like that poem. Man, that was a great day when that would happen. But that was our focus. So it's interesting,
This is Harold McKenney, who was part of another
of my
group
mentors.
much earlier, probably late 40s, early 50s, and they had an artist space. What was it called again? The
World Stage.
The World Stage.
They also rented the auditorium at the Detroit Institute of Arts and put on jazz concerts in the early 50s, when their members included guys who were students at Wayne State, like Yusef Lateef, Donald Byrd, Barry Harris. There was a whole wave of men who went on to become great, and some women, went on to become great jazz artists recognized throughout the world. They came out of Detroit in the 40s and 50s.
This is another place called the Castle.
Yeah.
Which was a kind of a commune that you had set up, basically.
Cooperative.
Cooperative for housing. This is a guy that...
James Ford.
Ford, yeah, James Ford.
He ran the chili joint on the corner. I ate with him every day for a couple of years.
This is what a mimeograph press looks like.
That was
I guess it was sort of
A.B.
like
Dick.
the internet.
That's an A.B. Dick.
There you go. This is
I'd
the
recognize that anywhere.
Monteith Journal cover. The cover of this is kind of interesting because Leni went around and she would take paint and paint over these fallout shelter signs and turn them into peace signs.
Oh, great.
And that's what that was. Nobody knew
Fallout shelters.
who was doing it.
I know there are many here who will remember the fallout shelter as a way of life. Fully stocked.
So these are
Why you could go down there and stay for months. Wouldn't have to see any more Americans.
these are some of your early journals that
I was just listening to that Bob Dylan record the other day where he talks about the fallout shelters. That was so funny. Give me a string bean because I'm a hungry man.
This is Charles Moore on the cover of Work One, and John is wearing a Stanley Mouse design T-shirt. Stanley was kind of a monster proto-hippie freak of Detroit that sort of made thousands of dollars in high school. He was like he was driving a Corvette when he was 16 because he was making so much money, selling T-shirts and pinstriping.
Well, he'd set up at the state fair every September.
Yeah.
He used to have a state fair at the state fairgrounds.
This is one of my.
They got rid of that.
This is one of my favorite.
Now they have it in Plymouth.
This is James Seamark's first book from your.
Artist Workshop Press.
The Book of Humors, right? Oh, it's your phone or something.
At least it didn't rain.
It's sort of a book of concrete poetry, and he had a kind of his own kind of version of this in the late 50s, early 60s, and he invented this thing called, what was it, ballads, rhythm ballads.
Rhythm ballad, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have time to play those. This is a picture of the Fugs songbook that John's association with, your association with Ed Sanders was very strong, and he gave you this.
He's my mentor.
He gave you this book to sell to help raise money and keep the
For
workshop.
the Artist Workshop.
Yeah.
He let us print the book and sell it without giving him anything.
And the book that's on this side is from Fuck You Press, which was a journal that he ran.
Well, Fuck You Press was the press. The journal was called Fuck You, a magazine of the arts.
Precisely. And he ran this out of his bookstore, the
Peace Eye,
Peace Eye.
Tompkins Square.
And they were both, there was a mutual kind of fandom going on between Ed Sanders and John. I think Ed was just amazed at the workshop, at what they were pumping out. If you go over to the Broad Museum and you look at these things, they're like half an inch thick, mimeograph zines. All
150 pages.
Incredible stuff. It's just physical work involved in this was just, wasn't called the workshop for nothing.
We were on drugs.
These people worked all night long and day long on these projects.
We took speed to stay up all night and run the mimeograph machine. We snorted cocaine
it's very funny
to get inspiration.
That was
to write
also
the poems.
That was also
We smoked weed.
That was also the drug of the sort of Warhol scene. That was a little bit later.
Of what?
The Warhol scene around the mid '60s.
Warhol. You're talking
was
about
very
the
speed.
70s.
No, '60s. I believe. You're the Warhol.
You remember when that woman tried to kill him?
What? The late
When that woman tried to kill him?
Valerie Solanas. This is another artist that they showed. I think this is the first flyer ever made. I don't know. It's some sort of thermal process, kind of a forerunner of the Xerox machine. And this is Stephen Legoski.
Wow.
I got to say one thing though. Every person that I've met out of this workshop is amazing. They are very unique and very, what's the word? They're not that they're loner types. They're
Regular people.
They're regular people. They have no ambition, but they're all geniuses in some weird way, like genius artists. Like
we have ambition to create art that's good.
This is
enough.
Howard Weingarten was one of my favorite people I met, and he died a few years ago. But he could draw like Michelangelo. He was like just extremely talented, but also sort of a mad character. This is another of his paintings. He draw these transparent, almost three-dimensional, like.
Great artist.
Yeah, I think they're almost like a spiritual kind of thing, but very pre-Raphaelite.
Right, he was spiritually inspired.
Out-of-body experience is what I kind of think he was.
That's what he was trying to record.
And this is a painting he worked on for over 20 years called The Ghost Ship. And when I met him, he was still adding every day to this painting, a huge canvas. And The Ghost Ship was like one of his last things in life he wanted to finish. And he'd go, "Is it finished? Do you think it's done?" I go, "Yeah, it's done." Stop.
Howard.
But he would, he was always kind of. This is a picture I took of him in his small apartment, filled with paintings. And this is Charles Moore. If you get a chance, he had an incredible tone. I mean, as a musician, this guy was just genius. He was really Detroit's version of Miles Davis. I mean, he incredible. This is performing in front of.
There's me as a young man.
This is
Nice looking young man.
DeRoy Auditorium, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, those arches.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the World Trade architect. Yamasaki designed this. He designed a lot of the buildings on Wayne's campus. And he did a great garden if you ever go there to look at that. It's Archie Shepp at Downbeat. This is Coltrane. These photos, almost everything you're seeing are photographs taken by Leni Sinclair, who was lucky enough to be there and document these things.
It wasn't luck.
It wasn't luck. Providence.
Blessed.
Yeah. I mean, incredible. But she also
we went there on purpose. It wasn't like you were walking on the street
Right.
and all of a sudden there was John Coltrane. No. We would drive to Chicago or New York to see John Coltrane. He was like God to us.
These jazz photographs, the series that she did of like the bent light things coming, the light coming off the jazz were really incredible. It gave you the feeling of jazz. This is on stage. I think you have a pile of Gorilla magazines.
January '67. I'm trying to give Train a copy of our paper.
Where was that venue? Do you remember?
Cobo Hall, Detroit. Marion Brown.
Yeah, he's also
godfather of my daughter.
Incredible musician, and was he an ESP artist? I think. This is Cecil Taylor. We're talking about getting. I asked John if he ever got Cecil Taylor to play, and he said that he was like always too expensive. He was kind of like the.
It wasn't that he was too expensive. It was just too big.
Yeah. He was
for us to approach because we had nothing. We could approach guys that we knew personally, like Marion Brown, Andrew Hill, Burton Green, and ask them to come to Detroit. The guys from Chicago, Joseph Jarman.
This is Joseph Jarman. And then,
we knew them personally. We smoked joints with them. We knew them. But Cecil Taylor, I knew Cecil Taylor, but I would never have been able to ask him to come to Detroit because he would have wanted some money and we didn't have any.
This is Ron English, one of your early compatriots.
Ron English from Lansing, Michigan. He was my first, one of my first friends. who was an artist, a musician. There's C-Mark.
This is, yeah. You could play this for 1 second, maybe just like a second. You'll get an
C-Mark?
idea what a rhythm ballad is.
Oh, great.
So if you just click it, just play it for like 10 seconds or something.
Man, this is quite a shotgun approach to presenting this history. I'd hate to be in the seat to anyone here because I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how it's going to get them.
That's right. Not just for you and for me, but a written battle for all. I'm not going to tell you about in between Mary and
Okay. This is when you visited Charles Olson and Allen Ginsberg.
It's like Ed Dorn on the right.
This is the poetry conference, right, in Berkeley.
Right.
This was a major, 1965. You and Robin, I think a bunch,
Charles Moore, Martine.
Charles Moore,
Leni.
Martine. Did Lenny came too, right? You got in your car, your Opel, and you drove across country as guests of, were you a guest of Creeley? Or,
Robert Creeley got me a scholarship to this event so I could afford to go.
yeah.
Now we stayed with different friends.
And you read here too. So this was
And
like,
he got me a reading.
yeah, this festival of poetry, 1965, if you, there are books written about it. It's become sort of an immortalized
I
moment.
just did some interviews with the guy who's writing a book about it.
Yeah, it's, and this was an idea that you had started, the Free University in out of the workshop.
Yeah.
And this was like where members were teaching classes in music and
Whatever you wanted.
film, whatever. Yeah, it was a cool idea, and you wanted to have Olson's Human Knowledge, an essay that he wrote, as your textbook, right? Was that? Am I getting it wrong?
It's called Human Universe.
Human Universe. Yeah.
It was published in an extremely expensive handmade edition in San Francisco. We thought there should be a popular version that anyone could read. I had a copy of this, but it cost $25, which
Wow.
in 1965, $25 for a book was like paying $1,000. It was just unbelievable. But I had one because it was Olson. I had to have one.
And Olson agreed.
So we got, Rob and Ike, we got a press. What do you call them? I was a mimeograph guy. I never did graduate.
Offset press.
Yeah, I never did graduate to the offset press. I could mimeograph my ass off. But Ikley had the other one, the real press. We wanted to print real books. We wanted to go beyond mimeograph. That was the flyer for the Olson.
Yeah.
We had
Right.
a telegram from Olson where he gave us permission to print the book.
I don't think it
And
was
we
ever.
printed a few pages, and then we saw that there was a Grove Press edition of Human Universe. We thought,
Oh, that's.
oh dear, well, I guess that one's covered.
I thought you were arrested, and that's why.
Arrested?
I thought you did. I thought you were.
For Human Universe?
No, for marijuana. I thought
Oh,
you were
for
on
my
your-
other crimes.
I thought you were like your second. I thought you were in.
You know, it's
jail.
interesting in 2018 that by the end of this year, if all goes well, marijuana will be completely legal in the state of Michigan. And the 3 years I spent in prison for this, no one will even say they're sorry. But it will be over. It'll be a different world. I won't be a criminal anymore. I've been a criminal in Michigan since 1962. Yeah, not that I give a fuck, you know.
This is.
That's nice to get a hand for being a criminal, thanks. Just hope I don't break into your house.
This man here, Harvey Oshinsky, was the guy that started the Fifth Estate, one of the
And
first-
next to him,
Next
don't
to him-
forget Detroit's first hippie, Jerry
Jerry
Youngkins.
Youngkins. Yeah.
Quite a distinction. We produced a lot of hippies in Detroit, but he was the first one.
This is absolutely my favorite poem of yours, John.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Thanks.
this is like, so a lot of people don't get the humor in John's poetry.
Oh,
He's like a, you know, like William Burroughs is like one of your favorite writers, I would say.
Absolutely.
And I think they have a similar, like, if you are aware of Burroughs, the satire that he has, it's dark.
I wrote my master's thesis on naked lunch.
It's a very similar kind of vibe I get when I
Thanks.
read like this. We
I
were talking
appreciate
about,
that.
you know, I had notes about it, you know, the Batman. Anyways, this is this poem for Warner Stringfellow is something we reprinted in this workbox that we did on the 50th anniversary.
Excuse me.
And I wanted to show Dudley Randall from the Broadside Press here,
Dudley Randall.
who started
There's a
this
great
press,
American.
kind of really inspired by what John was doing. And
Oh,
was the artist.
horseshit.
Oh no, he has said that. And
Come on.
Yes, the Broadside Press
Come
was
on.
one of the inspirations of them doing this. Was they saw what you were doing in
Wow.
Detroit. They knew that they could pull off.
Wow. Thank you.
It's true. It's true. This is
That's
Sonia
quite an honor.
Sanchez. Yeah, well,
Broadside Press went on to become one of the pillars of the black literature renaissance of the 60s and 70s.
right.
Broadside Press out of Detroit, founded by Dudley Randall. And then after he died, operated by my dear friend Melba Joyce Boyd,
Well,
who wrote his biography also.
Didn't Don Vest and Hilda?
I don't know Don and Hilda Vest, but I know Melba
They
Boyd.
ran it. And then right now it's merged with the Lotus Press. I forget.
Naomi Long Madgett.
Yeah. This is Stanley Mouse's booth at the State Fair.
Oh, wow.
Where I would go every year to just stand there and watch.
Yeah, you'd have to watch.
Because I couldn't get,
He was
my parents would yank
fantastic.
me away as soon as I got near the guy, because it'd be like bikers and greasers and freaks surrounding this place and getting their T-shirts made.
Were those the monsters you wanted to destroy?
No, I wanted those T-shirts. I just couldn't afford them. They were like, you know, $15 or $25.
Oh, they weren't $25.
20.
They're probably $3.98.
No, they were.
$15, you could buy an Armani
He was
suit
driving
for that.
he was driving a Corvette. He was
That's because he worked hard and he sold a lot of them, and he went on to invent the great posters for the Grateful Dead, the Avalon and Fillmore Ball.
This is something else he invented, was the rat fink, and a lot of people don't know it. This was kind of his creation that was lifted from Big Daddy Ed Roth. Became,
Well, that was his inspiration.
yeah, he was his inspiration, absolutely. Here he is. Stanley moved to
And Kelly.
San Francisco, right, in probably 65, 66. 65, and started the psychedelic poster art scene there. These are some of
Joe Mulkey.
Lenny. That's who he is?
That's Joe Mulkey who owned the tape recorder in
He's
the
the-
artist's workshop.
He's the guy that recorded all the things.
So any music that we were able to preserve would be because Joe Mulkey would pack up his tape recorder and bring it to the artist's workshop
Right.
and put one of those little square mics like right there. We had no microphones or sound system or anything.
And Lenny
It
started.
was just in the living room. And so if Joe Mulkey would show up today, I can play you that music from that day because he was there. He's a giant in my world. Because I'm a documenter. I like to document everything that happens. Because
What
you
was the
go
line
down
that
the
you
road 50 years and there's no way you got to confront the actual thing that happened.
There's
you
a
know?
quote of yours that it was something like live as if, or write as if everything is like future history. Or
Look on each act as future history. Yeah, I wrote that in 1964.
Oh, this other thing I wanted to say about this photo with Leni is this free poem movement was something she was handing out on the street, these poems to whoever would walk by, or if you
We would mimeograph a poem on a sheet of paper and then
it became
pass them out on the Wayne State campus, but not to anyone, just to people who looked like they might appreciate a poem.
but it became a movement
They'd
too.
have long hair, or a mustache, or a beard, or hair on their legs, or whatever, to distinguish them from a
I wanted to ask you
square.
about this National Dopester piece that you wrote with
Ron English and I did
with
that right
Ron.
here in Lansing,
This is like
over
a
on
brilliant.
Ann Street.
I've always wanted to reprint that. But it's one of the most Burroughs things.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
guys, I just put that out to show you, to show your inspiration. And this is about the time it became, the workshop
67.
became Trans-Love Energies. It sort of morphed.
Exactly. 67, January.
67.
Well, I don't know when we shot that picture, but that's when. Wow, Sunrise.
Sun Ra and your relationship. This is Leni filming.
Making a movie.
This is Martin Elgart, again, the dancer that was
Martine.
on the cover. She was one of the founders of the Human Be-In 1967. She married Michael Bowen. And this poster for the Human Be-In was drawn by Stanley Mouse, also from Detroit. And they not only arranged this through the Oracle, Michael Bowen and her were both working there. They also helped with that, what was the thing at the Pentagon, the levitation?
Levitation of Pentagon, yeah.
This was a kind of a little incident here in Detroit where, this is Gary Grimshaw, the artist. I'm about to show you a bunch of his work. But I guess the police...
This is brutal, man.
Yeah, some cops had seen a kite in his...
In the artist workshop.
in the artist's workshop. They busted in and said, you gave him a ticket for obscenity? Was that...
Yeah.
Is that the...
Just flying an obscene kite.
That, because
the
it was
4th
an
of July,
American...
it said,
it was a-
fuck America, go fly a kite. They didn't have any sense of humor
Emil
whatsoever.
Basila, a filmmaker. This is Ed Sanders on the cover of Life magazine in
Oh, wow.
67. And if you haven't read The Family about the Manson thing, it's probably one of
The happily departed Charles Manson.
the incredible document, though. This is the Fugs, which they played Detroit many times. Supporting acts like the Stooges and
MC5.
MC5. This one cover of Work magazine is drawn by Grimshaw, and it was one he did on LSD, and a lot of his work was kind of inspired by psychedelic. This was interesting because this is George Benchudis' flag here, one of the Fluxus founders, and then this was a flag that you guys had on the back of. I think it's a Jerry Yunkins design, but kind of similar thing I just wanted to point out. These are designs of Gary's from the Warren Forest Sun. You had your own kind of newspaper.
Kind of.
This is the first Grandy Ballroom poster, and then the C became sort of a venture that, I don't know, was kind of...
Lasted 2 weeks. An alternative to the Grandy Ballroom.
Yeah, this is on the stage of the Community Arts Auditorium, the MC5. This is John here holding the sax. I think that's you, right?
One of those is me.
The sax, and it kind of reminds me of the ghost dance thing, like I was thinking about in Community and how that was kind of like, they'd play Black to Calm at the end of the set, and it was kind of like a free-for-all freak out with, people from the audience coming on stage and dancing. These are little drawings and samples of Gary's work. They staged 11, kind of a version of the San Francisco thing. This is Rob Tyner and John in the background up here. in a muumuu that Leni designed. This is this the workshop again? This is during the
Workshops
riots.
around the corner, the print shops around the corner. On the corner is the Detroit Community and the War in Vietnam. Our apartment was upstairs.
And was this
Corner
about?
of Warren and Forest, where
And I
there's
think-
a shopping center
Okay.
now.
But the sign, Burn Baby Burn, which was, that
By
was
Grimshaw.
incorporated in our.
Signed by Grimshaw.
Grimshaw, right. This is, I don't think Grimshaw, I think it's Robin Summers maybe.
No, come on, really?
Yeah, I think it's Robin Summers. I showed it to Grimshaw, and he signed most of his works. This is the signing of the MC5 and the Stooges together at Hill Street. You guys had left during the riots, after the riots, I mean, to Ann Arbor.
Yeah, you're galloping along.
Well, I gotta speed it up. I don't know, how are we for
Are
time?
they going to get to say anything?
Well, where are we, Steve and I?
We're at 5:30.
We're okay?
If we want to save some time to field some questions.
I'm gonna, this is a film, I'll go
This
through
is
this.
like a incomprehensible travelogue.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through them
I'd
real
rather
fast.
figure out what you'd like to know about what we're here for and
This
then
is
answer it.
Grimshaw's design for the first MC5 album that was never used because it was showed a burning American flag. And he felt bad about it, actually, and he redid it. Yeah, so he was a vet, you know, and he had, so he put the
That was
sun.
his problem.
Okay. These were your infamous liner notes
I remember them well.
for the great,
But what about these people?
what about?
I mean, we could do this at my house, you know.
Do what?
You could show me these things, but
Yeah, I'm just speeding along here. Just
okay.
this is an
It's
advertisement.
not a trip that you can speed on.
Yeah. Well,
That goes against the whole concept. It gives the wrong idea,
what
if
time
I
is
may
it?
say so. Since I'm here as the expert, I should
5:30.
at least say that this is horseshit.
Okay, I'm going to stop at 5:30. Okay. And then
Okay,
we
you
could
got
take
2
we'll
minutes.
take questions. I got 2 minutes, so let me just go through this. This is Reverend Jesse
6
Crawford.
o'clock, they come in, the union will,
Some people know this history. Maybe they want to see it. You know, this is like Grimshaw's, psychedelic.
that's all well and good, but don't you have an exhibit
This
here
is
that you
his
could direct
mutation
them
phase
to?
when he was doing sort of blob kind of art, which was very inspirational to.
But am I right or wrong? Don't you have an exhibit at the museum?
No, it's over.
You don't? It is?
It's over, right?
Up
No,
until May.
he's talking about, yeah, but it's just it's just the artist workshop.
Okay,
They don't have this kind of stuff in it.
okay.
It's kind of,
I'll shut up.
this is a trans love shop. I could do this fast. This is my favorite all-time poster of Gary's. It's like incredible. The Woolies, which I don't know if anybody knows, one of the members is a resident of Bob Beldori.
Of Okemos.
Is he here? Bob, please stand. Where's? No?
I tried to invite him.
Okay. I thought he was going to be. These are cards that they would hand out at the Grandee. Another favorite image is this eye that he designed. We put that in one of our box things. Straight Theater in San Francisco. This is a crowd at, I think it's the State Fair. I think it's the Rock and Roll Revival. And I attended this concert, actually. I hitchhiked there, and I remember seeing the White Panther party booth, and I bought a bunch of papers with my friend Russell Linden, who was my locker partner, and we started to sell, buttons and newspapers out of our locker for months until the police kind of came and confiscated everything, called our parents. We were suspended for like 2 days or something. But that was a very kind of radicalizing moment. I was a junior white Panther, you know. These are the covers of Gorilla. Gorilla turned into this broadside thing when, who was it, Alan von Newkirk moved to New York, and he hooked up with Ben, from the Motherfuckers, what was his name? Ben Moria? Moria, yeah. This was probably what I was selling at the time, the Sundance. This is Pun Plumunden, the Black Panthers. Jeannie Plumunden from the White Panther Party. This is your brother, David, and Leni at a hearing for your conspiracy. So I think this getup that Leni's gagged and an American flag, and I can't read everything. It seemed like something was kind of an incredible.
It's the Michigan Supreme Court. They wouldn't let me appear for my hearing, so she protested.
It was like a theater piece almost.
It was in Lansing.
Yeah. And while John was in prison, this movement to free John now arose. I'm going to go through that. It's hard to do this real quick.
A long ways past the artist workshop now.
Yeah, we're well past. Well, this is at the Ann Arbor Free John. I think the fact that they got John Lennon and Yoko Ono to perform there was a huge feat. This was kind of like the first time rock and roll and politics had kind of really come together in a really meaningful way.
Well, they had the concert for Bangladesh.
After. But
was that after this?
That was after. Yeah. This is a meeting of. I won't play the
Thank you.
the John Sinclair song that you probably are not real happy about, but for this event, John Lennon wrote a kind of a ode to John. Guitar Army, I remember coming out after you were released, about a week later after the concert. These are some records from Strata that Lyman Woodard did, and Kenny Cox. That's Kenny Cox in the middle there, who co-founded Strata with Charles Moore. Henry. This is the Blues and Jazz Festival, Muddy Waters. John produced 3 years, was it 3? Yeah, 3 years of that. Sun Ra performance.
You have to skip Cobb's Corner.
Oh yeah, sorry, I skipped Cobb's Corner. It's kind of a sad, it's a kind of a sad moment in Detroit history, but we could call this the question. We're almost through, so we could call this the Q&A moment. Did you have a question about?
How did it tie into the workshop?
John knows this story, and I don't know if you want to tell it.
Or did it tie into the artist workshop?
Did it?
Oh, there you are. I was trying to see who was talking.
Did it tie into the artist workshop?
Well, the same concept, yeah. To have music by local artists. It was a bar.
Preceded that, though. Yep.
The artist workshop was from 64 to 67. This was in the 80s, 70s, I mean.
Late 70s, yeah.
Same people. Lyman Woodard played there, made a record there.
John also managed
Ron English
Mitch
played
Ryder
there.
and the Detroit Wheels. A lot of
Not
people,
the Detroit Wheels.
No, just the Mitch Ryder. Am I going forward or backward? I can't.
I don't know, but we should.
We should, yeah.
Question and answer time.
Yeah, let's do that.
Did you know Cobb's Corner?
No, some of my elders hung out there,
A great place. 7 nights a week they have music by Detroit jazz artists.
Yeah.
I was the booking agent and in charge of publicity for my friend Henry Normile, who owned it with his brother, Howard. Henry got murdered there on January 29th of 1979.
You discovered his body, didn't you? That night?
Yeah, he was my best friend.
Bud Domran, Bud Domran,
What name rings a bell? What's that?
John Rosebeard.
John.
They were helping out with the jazz scene down there,
Bud.
presumably.
I'm not hearing it so good.
John, who was it?
John Rosebeard?
Rosevear?
Oh, John Roosevelt. Yeah, in Ann Arbor. He wrote the first book on marijuana.
Yeah. His family.
I just saw a picture of me and him the other day. I knew him way back then, you know. He had some pretty good weed.
John, this is the installation that was at the Broad.
Oh, nice.
Just wanted to show
Oh, I'm in there with the tire. Great.
you. Yeah.
They made artwork of me with the tire around my
Well,
head.
wait, this is it.
It's my favorite. Yeah. Quite an honor, I thought,
I was hoping to end the
as
talk
a,
about
as a
this.
Detroiter.
This is Beyonce, the
That's my
judge,
granddaughter.
Damon Keith Keith, is it? And Leni at a signing at the bookstore. And Keith was the presiding judge in the conspiracy trial.
To which we haven't made any reference. So.
Yeah, we haven't. I think that's something you need to look into because, well, I don't know. All our rights have been taken from us since the time. But for a brief moment,
You ain't seen nothing yet.
for a brief moment there, you had to be sort of.
Pretty soon the idea of rights is just going to be something they laugh about. That was so last year. Rights. What do they need rights for? Are they doing something wrong?
So yeah, go. Yeah.
So you and Lennon both had the distinct displeasure of being, targeted by Hoover and the FBI. For,
Along with many others.
yeah, and I mean for kind of the same reason. What was that relationship like? Well, how did that even come about? You and
I don't
Lennon?
understand what you're saying.
How did the concert come about? How did Lennon find out about you? Or how
Oh.
We have to mention Jerry Rubin here for a minute as a kind of a.
Well, you want me to answer this,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
do you
go
want
ahead.
to? I was a member of an organization originally known as the White Panther Party, and then from the spring of 1971, known as the Rainbow People's Party. During the 2.5 years I was in prison, this organization organized benefit concerts on my behalf, almost. Well, we didn't do them ourselves. Somebody was doing one about every week. We were trying to keep it out. My only hope was that the public would demand my freedom, because the state had put me in prison for 2 joints for 9.5 to 10 years. And they said I was a threat to society and I couldn't be allowed on appeal bond, even though my appeal was successful and I overturned the constitutionality of the marijuana laws. Well, they were dead set against me not being in prison. They thought this was really the solution to the problems in Michigan, was to have Sinclair be in prison. So they held to this pretty closely. At the end of 1970, there was an attempt to change the marijuana laws in the state legislature. But they didn't. They didn't vote on them, and they closed the year without voting on this. Well, for me, this meant another year in prison. So all of that year, I was determined to make a big stink before they adjourned in December this year. That at least we wanted to see if we could make them vote on this and say yes or no. We thought we had the votes. So blah, blah, blah. We organized a committee. We had a full-page ad in the Detroit Free Press signed by a lot of prominent Detroiters and Michiganders saying I should be released. appeal went to the Michigan Supreme Court. It was successfully argued there. There wasn't an outcome yet, but the outcome would come in March of '72. All of this is going up to December. We had a friend named Peter Andrews, very close friend. He had gotten a job as the events coordinator for the University of Michigan. Basically, he was going to teach them how to make money from rock and roll concerts, which they had scorned and outlawed up until that point. Now they wanted to make money on the Eagles, you know, reasonably enough. So they hired him. So he had access. So he got the biggest arena, the Chrysler basketball arena, 14,400 seat arena. He got this for the student organization to free John Sinclair to do a concert. So then we called everybody we knew to see if they would play on this thing. And I was pretty close friends with a guy named Jerry Rubin in New York City, who, along with Abby Hoffman, was the head of the Yippies. We were Yippies in Detroit, Ann Arbor. We were part of this group with them. So Jerry Rubin had become friends in turn with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who had moved to New York City. And they wanted to get involved in the interesting things that were going on politically, and somehow they hooked up with Jerry Rubin, who was at the very center of things. Well, Jerry Rubin was one of our biggest supporters, and he was one of the first to commit to come into Ann Arbor for this concert in December of '71. So Ed Sanders, who we've established was my mentor and close friend, was also trying to help, and he was also one of the organizing members of the Yippies. If you recall, when they staged the Festival of Life in Chicago in August of '68, Ed Sanders was in charge of the entertainment. And those who played were limited to, from Detroit, the MC5. That was me. So Sanders had written a poem explaining my situation, and it was in the underground press. Jerry Rubin took this poem to John Lennon and said, "This is a friend of mine, he's in trouble. We're going to Ann Arbor on December 10th to try and get him out of prison. Why don't you guys come?" And they said, "Maybe we will." And he read the poem, and he was moved to write a song on my behalf. And they decided to come to this thing. So that was how he got on. And the minute they said John Lennon was coming to look into the case of John Sinclair, the case was over. 3 days later, I was released from prison. Huge. Unbelievable. Well, it's like today where you got a president was elected because he had a reality TV show that everybody liked, you know? It was the beginning of that shit. So in that way, it was terrible, but I don't know about you, but I've never seen anything like this in my life. It's completely blowing my mind. How are you doing this? How do you do this? How do you live with this guy? I don't get it. What's wrong with you? Excuse me, sorry.
That's why the kids are in the streets today.
Yeah, because the adults got their heads so far up their ass, they can't tell a gun from not a gun. They want to know why do they do this? Anybody ever watch TV or a movie? All they got is people killing up people. That's what they do for fun in this fucking country. What do they expect? I'm so inspired by these kids. And these right-wing creeps calling them a bunch, something's wrong with these kids because somebody came in and killed them all. What kind of shit is that? What kind of country have we fucking got now? I'm sorry. I'm just a poet, you know? Sorry. Microphone.
Does anybody
all right.
have a?
There's a good sound in here. That's the lecture hall. Oh, wow. You're a monitor.
The music that y'all were a part of in southeast Michigan from the
You don't need that.
early 60s. I'm sure we all like it.
Mid-60s.
Yeah.
It's important to get these dates in order because you're dealing with history. I'm just saying that.
Who were y'all listening to leading up to that? And who were some of your contemporaries that we may not know?
Oh, man. You opened a big gate there.
What was the
You're better off saying what were the ones that you did know.
the ones that I know?
Yeah, the Eagles. I left rock and roll when the Eagles came in, okay? That was the end for me. That's not what I came for. Guys, it took 6 months to record one rock and roll song. You're in the wrong trade, fellas.
Both John.
Chuck Berry made 4 of the greatest songs ever made in 3 hours, over and over again. So did Charlie Parker. So did everybody up until the Eagle period. Excuse me, sorry. No, they had this period in the 60s, the whole hippie, they wiped us all out because it's so opposed to what they got now. First off, everything was free. People's minds were free. People were doing this because they wanted to get off. They wanted to have a good time. They weren't doing it for the money. The money came in when they discovered that millions of people liked this, and so they bought them all off by about 72, and then ever since then, popular music has been more of an instrument of oppression than it is what it was in the 60s, which was liberation.
American
It's a
Idol.
basic part of how they keep your head twisted in today's world. Lady Gaga, for example. I could name many, but I couldn't tell you what they sound like because I won't be listening. Sir. Oh, you're a mic place. Oh, that's Larry.
I don't need mine.
There, right. Thanks.
I love your rant on guns.
Okay.
And I have to ask this, because you all knew each other. Amboy Dukes, Ted Nugent. Did you guys know he was an a-hole back then?
He was always a... Let me say this clearly. That's a great question. Ted Nugent was always an asshole. I knew him when he was 18. He was an asshole. He was an egomaniac who thought he was the greatest guitar player in the world. He was so stupid. He didn't get high, see? He was so stupid, he didn't even know the song Journey to the Center of Your Mind was about drugs. That's stupid. Everybody in America knew what that song was about. There's Ted. I never miss an opportunity to diss Ted Nugent. And if he was here, I would say the same thing, believe me. Fuck him.
Yeah.
What about him?
Was he anyone you were familiar with that played this song?
I'm trying, who's, put your hand, oh, okay, thanks. I can't see so good, I'm old.
Welcome to the club.
Bob Seger, great artist in my book, and then he became a millionaire. Now he's a mediocre artist, like all millionaires, except for Bob Dylan. I don't even like his stuff since he's a millionaire. I like the example of Bob Dylan that he keeps playing, though. He loves to play. But I would rather hear Blonde on Blonde, one of the greatest albums ever made by a human being. I like to stick with the really good stuff, They don't have to keep making good stuff, but I don't have to listen to it.
Did
I
you
only
have a
listen to
question?
the good stuff. I got my own radio station online. I used to have to not say this, but now we straightened out our copyright issues and Radio Free Amsterdam.org. I want to have a radio station like they used to have where you could listen to it. It played only good records, presented by knowledgeable people. So I made one with my friends, and we do this for nothing. But you can listen to it all day and all night, and it never plays any bad records. I'm kind of proud of that. Called Radio Free Amsterdam.org. That's my plug for today.
Well, I'd like to make a plug for the Detroit Artist Workshop.com.
Okay.
So that's a website where, there's a lot of stuff you might have.
I just got a message from your website.
Yeah. It's
I
been...
was glad to see that.
Lenny hasn't been paying the bills, so I took it on. It's not an active, or let me say that, it's not a revival thing, and we're not looking for membership. It's just a history thing.
It's great.
And I'm just trying to present the history for what it was and is.
Well, in his old age, James Seamark came back to Detroit from living in Washington, D.C. area for years. And he came back here and realizing he was on his last legs, and he tried to revive the Artist Workshop. He did a really mammoth job.
He did. I mean, he was devoted to this.
And the smartest thing he did was enlist Cary Loren to help him with this. And he did all the good stuff, and now there's a website. So that's good. Otherwise, well, we just had our 50th anniversary, and Cary and I tried to plan with the help of the local arts institutions.
Yeah, I would like to-
50th anniversary celebration, and
Nothing.
no one would respond. And we ended up putting on a little concert at the Scarab Club just to keep our own hearts in the right place, but no one would respond.
The
Kinda
Mike,
blew
the
my
Mike Kelly
mind.
Foundation
They
did.
don't give a fuck about the artist work. So it's fun being here today and talking to you all about it, because otherwise people, they don't care. They don't give a fuck. Artist work.
I just wanted to say that the Kelly Foundation
Did you know John Lennon?
helped to.
You know, I mean, everything devolves into this celebrityhood bullshit, of which I'm not the least bit interested in. I know a lot of people in my life who are celebrities. I know a lot of people who nobody knows who they were, who are much greater than the ones that you heard of. So, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Who's the greatest musician you ever heard that nobody knows about?
Oh man,
One String Sam.
hundreds in New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans for 12 years.
I'd say in
What
Detroit,
about Detroit?
one String Sam in my book,
Yeah? So
Yeah.
he was the greatest?
one of the greatest. He
He
played
did pretty good for one string.
He played once. No.
Wayne
just-
Kramer plays a lot more than him, though.
Well, John discovered this guy out of.
I didn't discover.
Well, where was he?
I found out he was still
He
alive.
was still alive. He had a hit. He had a sort of minor hit.
It's a whole
called
different category.
I want $100, or what was?
I need
I need
$100 to go my baby's bond.
So you could YouTube
Because
it.
that's why I liked it so much.
Yes.
Would you be willing to recite a poem for us?
I can't, who is this?
She wanted you to recite a poem.
Oh.
Well, how about
If you're willing.
Yeah,
how
sure.
about
That's what I do.
do your what's the old gang of mine, or do you want to do that? You know that one?
Old gang of mine. The Screamers, you mean?
The Screamers, yeah.
I could do that. It's from the Artist Workshop. I wrote this 50-some years ago, and I still do it. I usually lead off my show with this numbers.
Yeah.
Because I still feel the same way. I happen to think that's a good thing to still feel the same way about good things from 50 years ago. I still don't want there to be a war. I don't want there to be racism. I don't want there to be an atom bomb. Now I'm kind of geeked up about eliminating handguns, but that's not going to go very far because they love those motherfuckers. They want to shoot each other up all day and all night. But anyway, I'll give you this poem. It's called The Screamers. Now you heard my idol, this Ernie Durham. I grew up listening to this guy. He rhymed everything he said. So I think I got my interest in poetry from this guy. I heard Robert Frost rhyme, and I didn't like it very much at all. But Ernie Durham, when he rhymed, he said, we start at 9 and don't whip the twister to the slammer till the chimes chime 12 times. Yeah, I like That's where I got my start. The Screamers stagger down overgrown sidewalks of memory, giving hand and giggling. Earth Angel, how I long for you. Where you been all these years? Johnny Ace with a hole in his head. Where you gwine, Ivory Joe? Or those stupid white imitations, the crew cuts, Jive Pat Boone, stealing their song, Boom, Two Hearts, Chuck Berry, Jimmy Reed. I walk 47 miles of barbed wire. I use a cobra snake for a necktie. I got a brand new house by the roadside made from rattlesnake hide. Oh, you really send me. Baby, you got to go for me or I'll beat your ass. Who do you love? Weird lullabies, broken hearts, long and lonely nights. For your precious love, I would have drank gasoline, and all I wanted was a little water. Where I came from, mysterious old phase of the imagination. Why you aren't here with me, old gang, beer drinkers, bull shitters, where did you go? Okay.
Should we,
1965.
It's up to you. I'm good. I think it's a good
I hate to be indelicate, but I gotta pee like a racehorse.
So, let's call it a day.